All right, here we go.
Right.
B, thanks for joining me in the studio, man.
Yeah, well, mobile studios now. But yeah, man. One
So,
day soon we'll be back in the studio, brother. One day soon we'll be back. But yeah,
absolutely.
well, this will do for right now.
Yeah, this is our virtual setup. We really appreciate you guys joining us on this webinar, our Q&A session, and we're going to be doing this every Tuesday. So please chime in with your rental property questions. If you guys know property managers that or investors that own property, please tell them about these Q&A sessions that we're holding every Tuesday. We want to help as many people as possible be successful in owning rental property. And before we get into today's webinar, which is about breaking the lease and skipping out, wanted to take a quick moment to introduce our Q&A host here. This is Bryan Chavis. If you guys don't know, Bryan Chavis is the best-selling author of the book Buy It, Rent It, Profit. He also is the founder of Chavis Capital and Bryan Chavis Coaching and Consulting, Landlord Academy. The list goes on and on. The book Buy It, Rent It, Profit is one of the only books in the U.S. Library of Congress. Actually, it is the only book in the U.S. Library of Congress on property management. It's ranked number 4 on the National Association of Realtors' top real estate books. It's a worldwide bestseller, and it's actually an official resource in Wikipedia for the definition of property management. Bryan's worked with government housing authorities, real estate associations, real estate schools. We also host our own landlord and investor and property manager networking events. And so, Bryan, man, thank you so much for being here, brother.
Thank you for putting all this together, Nathan. Greatly appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, real quick, man, why did we want to talk about this today? So we're kind of getting into these move out procedures, breaking the lease. I know things are a little crazy. Why did you want to make this part of the Q&A this week?
You said it right there. Things are a little crazy. So, I think when when I say people as our tenants, begin to kind of have a clearer picture of options that they may have, I feel like some of the options that are going to come down the pipe, especially if the tenants are not communicating with the owners, are going to be to move in with like their loved ones or friends, and perhaps leave a lot of units vacant and just up and leave and skip in the middle of the night. So you're going to see an uptick in vacancies, and leaving a lot of landlords and property managers and asset managers trying to really scratching their head trying to figure out what they need to do, how they need to react. What can they charge? How can they go after the tenant if they want to go after the tenant for loss of income? So there's a ton of questions and things that are going to be going through a lot of individuals' head. And then for those who do it the right way, but say, hey, listen, I can't survive, I'm going to have to move out. What is the procedure? Have we nailed down our move out procedures? Because it's going to be under scrutiny, even more right now. There's going to be a lot of individuals challenging charges and fees. I feel like, certain property managers, landlords, or owners may force property managers to try to go after and collect monies that they normally wouldn't. Mm-hmm. And it's going to cause a lot of tenants to have pushback. And you're going to see a lot of, cases where you find, the fight over the security deposit in small claims court. So, the two places that you're going to get sued the most in property management is fair housing and security deposit claims. So I just wanted to address that. That's not the only thing we're going to talk about today. Of course, we'll sit here and talk about it and answer any questions that our viewership, may have, or issues that they may have. But, I could just kind of trying to get ahead of a lot of the things that I see that are going to come down the pipeline, and make sure that we help address and get answers to some of our viewership.
Absolutely. And this is a Q&A session, so please feel free to chime in. I believe you can raise your hand if you have a question. There's also a Q&A section where you can drop a question in. This is for you guys. We did put together some questions. So in chapter 10 of your book, you have a whole section on move out, chapter 10 of Buy It, Rent It, Profit. I had a few
11.
Oh, chapter 11. Yes. Chapter 11. So you have 5 steps to moving people out of a property. So I took those and kind of turned them into questions. So you said step one was kind of scheduling a move out meeting. Why is that something that someone should do?
Yeah, that's really important because at the end of the day, getting everyone on the same page of what the charges, our pending charges may be, and being there with the tenant to dispute. And most states require that the tenant be in person or be present
Okay.
during the move out. So at the end of the day, it's really important that we schedule that. It's important that we try to perform the move out meeting with the tenant present, walk the unit with the tenant present, and making sure that the unit has actually been cleared. I know a lot of individuals try to do the move out and the tenant's still like literally living in the rental unit. So now you want to make sure that the unit has been vacated by the tenant as far as their items are concerned. They're there ready to turn in their keys, and then you walk the unit together, and that's when you're taking your pictures and making your documentation. I highly recommend you do this. You don't want to necessarily do this alone. Try to make sure that all my property managers have someone present. Usually our maintenance technician is present. And of course, with the coronavirus, if you're doing a situation, we're still in this this environment of being staying sheltered, then obviously you want to be able to kind of handle this move out inspection where we are at least 6 feet apart, and making sure that you're following the CDC guidelines as far as what we need to do to keep a proper distance from each other. But you still want to make sure you perform that move out, because one thing that needs to be clear is when this is all over, the court systems will open back up again. Creditors, you might get away with pushing back credit right now. You might even get away with having your eviction paused right now. But the key word is the eviction will be paused. No eviction is being thrown out. Evictions are being paused, which means they'll eventually pick back up again. So you just want to, you want to make sure that you stick to your procedures. As crazy as it may seem, you still want to stick to your procedures, because if you don't and you're not checking all the boxes, then you at the end of the day, you may leave a box unchecked. Therefore, the tenant may have a good argument that you did not properly notice them. You did not properly provide the walkout or the move-in, move-out inspection, okay, and challenge the security deposit and come after the entire amount, even if they've left damages.
Wow. Okay. Wow. I have another question based on that. So you said, I've seen you use a move-in, move-out inspection report. So why is it important to use something like that, like a report, versus just kind of just doing this on the fly?
Well, documentation. I mean, I've been to eviction court, and I've been to probably court probably well over 4,000 times in my career. I think I stopped counting at 2,700 times where I'm in court, either arguing over security deposits or, what have you, the eviction court. And so I know documentation is key. Right. And being well documented and having photographs and videos and having as much documentation as I possibly can helps when you're in court, because to be honest with you, tenants can lie better than you can tell the truth. And I've been in court sometimes where I've had the tenant say something and I'm thinking to myself and scratching my head going, damn, did I say that? Or did I do that? Because they sound so daggone convincing. And so at the end of the day, if it's not in writing, then it never happened. And that's kind of really what, as a general partner and someone who's come through this industry 25 years plus, and started out leasing, that is what, how I was trained in the industry. And that is now, today how I train my team. And it's extremely important, because at the end of the day, if it's not in writing, then it didn't happen. So documentation is key.
I love it. Hey, thank you for sharing that. And then, so in chapter 11, you had a whole list of things that you can charge the tenant for. And then you also had a list of things that you can't charge the tenant for. What are some of the things that you could charge for? I know this is a question that we get a lot in class. What can you charge for on a security deposit?
I guess the question is, what should you charge for? Where do you start? Okay. So first of all, the security deposit, the monies are not yours. That's the first thing you have to understand, that money is really not yours. It's there for the security or performance. And you know, I underline that word performance, because a lot of people are going to be leaving their leases early, and then they're going to, what do I do with this deposit? Well, first you want to try to apply that deposit towards damages, and keep in mind, breaking your lease early and leaving, you know, during the middle of the lease, what's left on that lease is considered damages. So you can apply that to economic. There can be economic damage as well. So it doesn't necessarily just have to be physical. The first thing I train my team to do is look at the physical damage, because that's the most important part. And then, you know, because most people, what we call, you know, bad debt, we write off, you know, what they've you know, you know, what they did not fulfill in their lease term, we write that off the bad debt. So most of the security deposit needs to immediately go to any physical damage that may be in the property. And so then we turn our attention to physical damage, and what is physical damage, and if there's physical damage, what is physical damage versus normal wear and tear. And that's where a lot of the lines get blurred. That's where you have to really look at how long they've been in the rental unit. For me, I train my team, if they've been in there for over a year and a half and it's not really physical damage, then refund their deposit, because I spend more time and resources fighting in small claims court. You know, I'd rather just refund the deposit. Now, with that being said, there's a lot of viewers and listeners that are participating that may have single family homes, and it's not as easy. So it's a lot easier when you benefit from the economies of the scale with apartment buildings, to be able to write things off and be able to push security deposit, because you don't necessarily want to go to court. So you refund the security deposit, even if there's minor damage. You don't want to trigger anything that's going to waste your time or have you in court. But when you really need that security deposit money, like you do with smaller units, duplexes, 4 units, 8 units, you know, then you really have to be a little bit more conscientious about the security deposit, and you do have to be a hound. And so there, you know, you really, you know, the lines can get blurred, and you want to just make sure that you're not overcharging and you're not challenged in court. And the best way to do that is making sure that you document everything. And the key is documentation. Once again, documenting the unit before they took possession of the keys. You document the unit and the condition of that rental unit before they took possession. For me, is the most important part for my team. Mm-hmm. And that documentation is going to, you know, be able to, when there is damage or something that you would consider outside of normal wear and tear, that you're able to challenge it. And if you're challenged on it, then you're able to have a rebuttal and show that, no, this is something, you know, Your Honor, that was, you know, just recently replaced. We just put this vanity in prior to them moving in, and then having that documentation, having the invoice. Most property management softwares allow you to document with pictures, allow you to upload invoices. I highly recommend you do all of those things, all of the above. You document with the invoices, you document with pictures, you document with video, but you definitely want to make sure you document and upload that invoice to be able to show that, no, this was brand new when it went in. And I even have pictures and video of the unit being turned. So all the new items being installed, you know, our maintenance technicians do a great job of shooting video, before and after pictures. So I just have an overwhelming amount of support in my favor if challenged. You know, and to be honest with you, that's where I'm challenged, you know, the most is on the security deposit. And this is where most of you all are going to be challenged moving forward in the near future, because everybody's going to be fighting over every nickel and dime right now, just because of the way the economy is going. So you'll even see people who will break their lease, and they will be in debt to the lease and still try to fight you for the security deposit. So you just really have to, you know, make sure that you've dotted your I's and crossed all your T's.
Oh, hey, thank you for breaking that down, man. So I have another question based on that. So we have our move in, move out inspection report. We figured out what we're going to charge the tenants for. In Chapter 11, you said that there's a form called the intention to impose a claim. So how do you prepare this notice? Like, why are you giving out something? You don't just tell them, I need you to pay me X, or I'm going to.
Correct. Yeah. So most laws recognize Florida Statute 8356, or 8348, security deposit. I'm sorry. Florida Statute 8356 is termination of rental agreement. 8348 is explains the security deposit, and the imposed claim is a notice that the law requires a landlord to fill out and send. And then each state has their own requirement, their own sort of imposed a claim. And those guidelines may differ. There's the 80-20 rule. 20% of it differs from state to state, but most of them require you to fill everything out and document and itemize the damages in detail and what you're taking out of the security deposit, and then deliver that upon the tenant via either certified mail within a certain time frame. And then you have usually two different types of time frames, depending on if you're going to deduct charges. Then you have 30 days. If you're not going to deduct, then you may have something like 15 days. And again, those time frames are going to differ from state to state. But the idea and the procedure of making sure that you document everything, you have the proper documentation during the move-in. This whole entire process begins when they take possession and they receive their keys. So the time to start preparing for move out is not when the tenant says, I want to move out. That's not the time you want to. The time to prepare for eviction, the time to prepare for move out is when the tenant is actually moving in. That is when you're walking the unit with the tenant and you're reinforcing to the tenant, hey, do you see how you're receiving this unit? It's clean, it's in move-in condition. This is how I expect the unit back. Right. And I'm documenting that with them. So that same form or that same, we use what we call, I believe it's Sign Easy right now. We use an app. It's like $14 for the entire year. It allows you to take pictures, record, turn in the PDFs. It just makes life easy when the court asks you to upload these documents. It makes it a lot easier. Before, when I was in the industry, you used to physically have to come to court with the whole entire, folder in hand and submit it to the clerk of the court. Now everything is done by uploading stuff to the clerk of the court. And so these apps on your phone make life a lot easier. Then we upload that into the Buildium or the AppFolio that we use, the property management platform. We upload that in the Buildium and keep it moving. But ideally, you just want to make sure that you're doing this, that this move out procedure begins when they take possession of the rental unit, understanding that they understand how to turn that unit back over to you. And that if they don't, they can expect charges, pending. And so, that's probably the most important thing, Nathan, is just making sure that everyone understands that this starts with the move-in meeting, setting the tone for the move-out process, and then just making sure you're documenting everything from start to finish.
Okay. All right. So setting the tone. You said something about mailing the imposed to claim. So you can't just walk this up to someone's door?
I mean, if you know where they live, you can deliver it. But typically, here's the thing: when the law gives you direction, you follow the law.
Got it.
So right now, law doesn't require you to text message or message through your property management software. It doesn't recognize that. So you really have to, you want to look at your statutes, speak to your attorney in that state, and however the law directs you to deliver the notices is how you need to deliver it. If the law says, Florida statute says you must deliver it upon the door and knock on the door and wait for an answer. And if someone of the age of 14 years of age or older answers, you can hand it to the tenant, then that's exactly how you need to do it. Don't text message back and forth with the tenant and think that that's going to work because you've saved the screenshots and you're like, oh, judge, look, I've text messaged back and forth. The judge is going to say, well, I understand you text messaged, and that's great that you had that kind of communication. But what the law says, you had to deliver the imposed claim. Did you deliver that imposed claim? No, Your Honor, I didn't, because we were text messaging. The judges, if they challenge anything, they're going to ask you, did you properly deliver the notice? So if the answer is no, then you may stand the chance of losing. And then if you lose, you got to keep in mind in most states, you're going to be responsible for their attorney's fees as well. Mm-hmm. So it can get costly, So you're not only paying for the damage, you lose the security deposit, right? And now you're having to pay for court fees. So it can get out of hand really simple when you really, are not properly set up and put the proper systems in place. That's why it's really important, that a lot of these people teaching these syndication classes stop skipping over the property management and asset management portions in their trainings and really teach individuals how to operate properties day to day and stop thinking that they can just push it off on a third-party property manager and not really understand, how to set up the proper operating systems. It's extremely important because it can cost individuals thousands of dollars. And then, on top of that, lost time. So
That makes
that
sense.
you can't get back.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the most frustrating things that I see is classmates of mine giving up rental properties that they've inherited or that they've purchased because they don't know how to actually manage. These types of things get them in trouble. And yeah, these courses, these syndication courses, sometimes make it look way too easy. So
Yeah, unfortunately.
Adam chimed in, and guys, this Q&A is for you guys. Please don't be afraid to ask questions. We're all in the same boat. Either we're looking to acquire rental property or we own rental property. And we're all about education here. So, we do this twice a week. And we've been doing it for several years. So we want to answer your questions and help you guys. Adam just chimed in and said, "Hey, Bryan, good insights. What do you think about taking a security deposit larger than 1 month's rent in case things don't work out? Is that a good idea or a bad idea? What's important to consider?"
That's a great question. That is set up in your qualifying criteria. So each property should have its own qualifying criteria based on its prospect tenants, demographics, and psychographics. So you set up your qualifying criteria, and if a tenant falls short or just outside that, then you may want to ask for a larger security deposit. I know right now I've made some changes to my qualifying criteria, and I'm requiring individuals to come up with a security deposit. I just had someone who's making really good money right now with Lyft. And my guys reached out to me and said, "Hey, Bryan, this guy is a Lyft driver." And, right then and there, I said, well, it's contracted work. It's still considered a self-employed, almost like retailer or bartender right now. And so I'm automatically asking for either a co-signer or a deposit equal to rent. Mm-hmm. And so, that is because of, the sign of the times that we're in right now. I don't really think I'm out of that curve right now. I think maybe June or July, I'll have a much better picture of whether or not I feel everyone in the retail or service industry space or any kind of subcontractor space or entrepreneurial space is going to be able to weather this storm. And so making changes based upon your demographics and psychographics is important. I can go into a whole different 2 hours on why I select certain properties and assets. And this is the reason why. Is because, I selected the core markets of downtown St. Pete and other downtown areas to make my acquisitions because I'm banking on the demographics. I'm not buying buildings, I'm buying demographics and psychographics because, as you've heard me often say, buildings don't pay rent, people pay rent. So for me, owning multifamily has never been about owning buildings as much as it's about, buying demographics and psychographics and then really understanding what affects those demographics and psychographics, what affects those prospect tenants or tenants. And so asking for an extra security deposit, I think it's fine as long as you have the documentation and that you have a reason for asking for the an extra security deposit and you apply that fairly all the way across the board. That is the main thing. So you don't want to say, hey, for this person, I'm going to ask for an extra security deposit and someone else comes in and then, you have a whole different policy. You just want to make sure that, it's in writing, it's in black and white. And that, again, that is documented. But I don't think there's anything wrong with asking for an extra security deposit. I know other states, they may change. They may have various different rules and regulations on how much you can keep when you ask for an extra deposit. And that's fine. You just want to check and double check with your local state laws. But at the end of the day, that is, again, you can't really look at it like it's your money. It's just there for the security, for the performance of the asset. So, you have to move accordingly. So if you're asking for extra security deposit, it's because you should have a reason and some sort of concern. And right now, a lot of individuals as operators have concern with self-employed individuals or retail or service industry individuals being able to continuously, cover their rent. So they may make some sort of changes to their qualifying criteria. So as long as it's documented, I think you're fine. And then the next question, two people ask, well, is that fair? Well, the market will tell you whether or not it's fair. Because if you're not really leasing, if your leasing slows down or your traffic slows down, a lot of people say, hey, thanks, but no thanks. I'm going across the street. Their criteria is a little bit, more lenient. that is where it's going to get difficult for a lot of operators, because they're really now competing against the market and what other individuals are doing. And so, you may have an operator out there, a property management company or an ownership group that just simply says, hey, look, man, throw caution to the wind. And if they breathe and they have a pulse, lease the rental unit, because we're hurting right now. We got to cover this debt. We might be in forbearance right now. We might be dealing with our bank. We're going to need to start bringing some income in on this property. So they might loosen up. That's the first place people do, is they loosen up, Adam, their qualifying criteria to get more physical occupancy in hopes and prayers that they have, that the physical occupancy then results in economic occupancy. Often it doesn't, because when you lower your qualifying criteria, you basically open the floodgates to anything happening with your tenant. And typically when you do that, anything does happen. You'll have an uptick in delinquencies, an uptick in turnovers. And that's why, for me, I'd rather just try to weather the storm. I know not everyone can do that, but I'd rather just stick to my guns and my qualifying criteria. I'd rather have a vacant unit than a unit that's being physically occupied, but there's no rent because there's wear and tear on my rental unit. So,
hey, that makes sense. Hey, thank you so much. And guys, once again, please feel free to ask your questions. I've got another question for you. So based on that, what happens when a tenant skips out and leaves the unit trash? So, we talked about charging more, but what happens if they skip out and leave the unit trashed?
If what happens if a tenant, can you repeat that? What happens if a tenant skips out and they also leave the unit trashed?
Yep.
Yeah, you can watch a ton of my YouTube videos.
I was gonna say we've I followed you around with the camera.
Yeah.
Units. Yeah.
Yeah. So and it happens, and you're gonna, it's gonna happen now more, like I said, more often than none. So right now, then, what you do, the first thing you do is you just want to physically look. The main objective always, guys, is not to go after the security deposit. The main objective is to get the unit back, so you can get that unit back on the market. So my main objective is getting into that rental unit legally, making sure if they skipped, you want to verify. Sometimes, the rumor is that they've skipped, just going in there, guns a-blazing. If you feel like a tenant has skipped, Bryan, there's no electricity. There's no, the unit was locked. It was dark. Everything was shut off. There was trash in there. There was a garbage bag in the middle of the place. We went in, we took it out, removed everything, and we got the unit re-ready. And then 2 weeks later, the tenant comes back and they say they never moved out, but you threw everything out because the unit looked like it was vacated and there was a trash bag, and they gave you all the signs and indications. And matter of fact, the neighbor was like, oh yeah, they left, said they were leaving. Okay. But they came back, but the electricity was off. They tell the judge, well, yeah, because I got my electricity turned off, Your Honor. There was no furniture. Yeah, I got rid of all my furniture. It was Badcock. It was rental furniture. No, that wasn't a garbage bag. That was my items. There was a family heirloom in that bag. It was a ring. It was my grandmother's. It was worth $3,000. Guess what's going to happen? You're going to end up, as the owner and operator, you're going to end up, property management company owner, you're going to end up paying for that. So when you go in and you take back possession illegally, sometimes it's probably worth allowing, unless you get it in writing and you're really confident that the tenant actually vacated, you proceed with caution, because I've seen it. It's happened to me where a tenant has come back and said, no, I never vacated. And they just wait, and they're waiting for you to countersue you. So you just want to make sure that you understand, first and foremost, that the unit has been vacated. By all means, if you can, get a notice to vacate, get it in writing that they're leaving. And then, but if, you do find yourself in this situation where they've left, or you feel like they've left, electricity's off, it is trashed, and, you want to take that chance, like I said, just proceed with caution, document everything. If there's anything that looks like it's remotely worth anything, you may want to store it. Check your local state laws and guidelines and municipality guidelines on how to store those items. Check with your eviction attorney. But, you may not want to just throw all those items away if it looks like there may be something of value that is left behind. So document everything, and then, proceed again with caution and proceed to apply that security deposit towards the damage. And then if there's anything left, typically there isn't, but if there's anything left, then you can apply to the damages of the financial, the economic, or the damages to the lease, to where they've broken the lease early. And let's say they left you with $2,000 or $3,000 left on the lease, then you can begin to start applying it. And then whatever balance you have, then you can push that balance towards your creditor or send that to a credit agency that will go after them. But you want to make sure you document and have all your documentation, all your I's dotted and your T's crossed, because if there's something that is not in alignment or not correct when you send it to the creditor, they can countersue you. So just make sure that, you're well documented. Again, I'll keep coming back to this. Documentation is key. If you can't document and you're not confident, refund the security deposit.
Got it.
I know you don't want to hear that, but refund the security deposit, because it's an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. It's a lot easier to go ahead and refund that deposit versus going to court, being sued, and now losing the deposit and paying for their attorney's fees. So
that makes sense. Hey, we got a great question from Rick Stout.
Rick, my man.
In the house.
What's up, Rick?
So we got how many doors do you currently own? Do you self-manage all of them? And at what point would you go third party with your portfolio, if at all, since you mentioned the power of self-managing and operating? Do you only syndicate, or have you seen owner finance to have potentially a bigger stake in equity? And I'm sure you can see these in the chat section as well.
I was about to say, that's one heck of a question. Let me see.
Yeah, this is multiple. He said multiple questions. He forewarned us.
How many I own? We're shy of 2,000 units right now. Our focus is actually raising money, Rick. If you know my story, Chavis Capital started for raising money, waiting on the sideline. So we've raised a little over 20 million to take part in acquisitions moving forward. We have Park Plaza and certain acquisitions that we moved on in the core markets. Park Plaza's 22 units in downtown St. Pete. We moved on that just because of the location. But our goal is, and again, with the coronavirus, certain things may change, but our goal is still 2,500 units by the end of 2020. And we should be poised for that. As my focus with Chavis Capital has been raising money. I think the other part of that question was, how many have I owned in my portfolio? Over 2,700 rental units in my career before I got sick and had to liquidate everything prior to 2012.
Hey, Brian, I unmuted if you can hear me. I can go back and forth to make it easier for you. So you have 2,000. I guess my question is, out of those 2,000, do you self-manage just the I think you said it was Park Plaza, the one in St. Pete that you do all your videos with? Are those the ones that you're self-managing because they're local, and the rest you have third party, or are you guys self-managing?
Yeah, so Park Plaza is unique. I'm there because I'm able to shoot the videos and give that experience. The formula behind Chavis Capital is that I really try not to manage everything. Everything that we purchase outside of Park Plaza, that's an anomaly because of the location. I try not to mess with anything under 150 units. So I have built-in staff. So I'm able to come in. Typically, I won't maintain the staff that's there. Hopefully no one's watching. I mean, that's any properties that we may be buying in the near future. But no, very rarely do I keep anyone. Sometimes I do, but what I do is I go and acquire the property, and then I rehire and train everyone the same exact way everyone is being trained within the multifamily matrix. I train everyone, staff, and then put the management plan in place, and they execute upon the management plan. So management is something that I do, no matter where the properties are located.
You train the company that's in place, or bring a company
that's
in place?
Let everyone go. Let everyone go.
And hire your own. So you're self-managing with your own company, but you physically are not self-managing. Okay.
Correct. Yeah, correct. Yeah. So when you're dealing with institutional grade assets, Rick, you buy 200 units, 300 units is typically already staffed with the leasing it. The formula is for every 100 units, there's typically staff. There's one leasing agent and one property manager, one maintenance technician for every 100 units. So you're typically buying assets that are already staffed. I'll go in during due diligence, learn as much as we can about the property, and then, unfortunately, typically I do let, the pre-existing staff go. Very rarely do I keep somebody, and then we rehire and bring our own team in and train. And then, that's the formula. So it's managed and operated by Chavis Capital.
Okay. All right, cool. And my last question, do you syndicate with all of your deals, or have you done any, or maybe even in the beginning of your career, do you look for any like owner finance so that you have a little more stake, or maybe possibly better financing terms? I'm not sure, but is that something that you look at, or do you syndicate all the deals you're doing?
I mean, well, I think even if you do owner financing, it's still syndication. You still syndicate. So because you're using other people's money, anytime you raise money with others, you're syndicating. Or at least you should be legally.
I guess what I've heard from a couple podcasts was there was a couple folks that, and again, probably smaller deals than you're dealing with, but probably somewhere in the 30 to 80 unit range, they're finding just older folks that are towards the end of their career that might be looking for the cash flow where they can still get the payment with the 6% interest versus, taking the capital gains and doing all that. So most people can get in with 5, 10 to 20% down where they may not need to syndicate money. They might have that 5 or 10%.
Absolutely. So yeah, let's talk about that then. So yeah, let's talk about a deal that's under 80 units. Would I? Absolutely. Owner financing is brilliant. It's a great lever to pull. If you can pull that lever, absolutely. Sometimes it's wiser to convince sometimes an operator that, that may be a little longer in the tooth, and struggling on the operational side for someone that has certain skill sets. If I was a wholesaler, that's kind of what I would be doing. If I wholesale, or if I was a real estate agent or broker, I mean, I would be using my services and my skill sets that's what I did in the beginning, using my service, my skill sets to be able to take ownership. Instead of taking 10% in management fees, I'd take 3% in management fees and give me 10% ownership, equity stake based upon my performance. If I did that 10 times, I would have 100% of something without ever putting my own money in. And I'm not telling you things that I've heard. I'm telling you things that I literally done. That's how I got my career started, brother. I didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. And what I did was I said, well, what do you have, Bryan? Was I got the knowledge and ability to take this project from point A to point B, because that's all I've ever done. So I take a percentage of ownership. I reduce the management fee, take a percentage of ownership of these assets. And if you could, as the general partner, if you can find deals and you can reach out to owners, direct mail pieces. If you're already wholesaling and you're sending out a bunch of direct mail pieces, I kind of would change up the verbiage, and I would try to attract a lot of operators and owners that are possibly struggling. There's going to be a heck of a lot of those in about another 3 to 9 months. A lot of individuals that may not be able to weather this storm, and they may look to bring in someone that has skill sets, like mine, to be able to take over the property. And they may be willing, instead of losing it, they may be willing to work with you and see if you can take and stabilize their property. It may just need, great management and better decision-making. So absolutely, I feel owner financing is extremely important, and is an important tool, an important lever to be pulled when you can.
Awesome. Thanks, Bryan. And I just want to say, thanks for your book. Read it a few times before I bought my first duplex. My systems and processes have been flawless because I took them all out of your book, literally just copy and pasted into Google Sheets, and have 2 great tenants that both paid April rent. And just thanks to you for your book and the live events you've been doing here in Tampa. Really grateful for you. Thanks, Bryan.
Man, I'm grateful for you. I'm so happy, man. And when I hear that, that's, to me, that's what it's about. The book wasn't written for the money. It wasn't written to be in the U.S. Library of Congress or even on the bestsellers list. It was actually written, for people to be able to duplicate and do exactly what you did. So to hear that, really, man, is all the payment that I need. So I'm greatly appreciative of you, man, and thank you for that.
course. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Nice. Hey, Willie chimed in with a question. Hey, Will, you wanna ask your question to Bryan directly?
Yeah. Can you hear me, man?
I can hear you.
Yep.
All right, cool.
You're live, caller.
Cool, man. I just wanted to ask you, when you're trying to get a property leased up, and there's a lot of different tenants out there, man, how do you kind of screen your tenants to find the best quality tenants for your property?
Good question, Will. So that begins during the due diligence process, as I talked about. So when you're looking to buy property, you're not really looking to buy physical property, buildings. I think that's what everyone loves, but that's not what I was taught in the multifamily industry. What I was taught was that they were buying demographic, or we were buying demographics and psychographics, and that's what I was taught. And that is what you're really doing. So when you're looking at areas like Raleigh or parts of the Carolinas, you're not necessarily looking at buildings, so jumping on LoopNet or wherever and looking for buildings. What I'm doing is combing through data, city data and government data, and I'm learning about local municipalities, and then I'm drilling down and learning about the demographics and psychographics of who those individuals are, their employment, their drive time to work, the average household income, average household size. I'm learning more about that individual than they know about themselves. Then once I drill down to a certain demographic that I feel confident that can weather certain economic storms that I'm forecasting, then I begin to look at property that those individuals would want to gravitate towards. So I think everyone, for the most part, again, I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus, but I guess I am. But when you have all these real estate conventions and gurus and everyone's talking about the physical property, it blows my mind. I automatically understand that these individuals probably haven't been in the multifamily game for that long, because that's just really not the case, and this is where you find yourself in trouble when the market does change and everybody's like, oh, my tenants can't pay rent. Oh, my tenants are skipping out. Well, because you didn't focus on your tenants in the beginning. Well, you bought the building. You didn't buy the tenants, but the building ain't paying you rent right now, is it? The building didn't come by on April 1st and drop off rent. The people do, and you can't find the people right now, and the people are dodging you. Well, because you didn't really do your homework, and that is where this comes in, Willie. You have to do your homework on Raleigh, North Carolina, on the Carolinas, or wherever you're investing. You want to do your due diligence, your CO, the strategic evaluation of a target area on the demographic of the individuals. You want to know more about them than they know about themselves. Then you find the product and back them into the product or the apartment. Then you set up the qualifying criteria and the rules or regulations around that individual. And that may change from zip code to zip code to zip code to zip code. That qualifying criteria and rules and regulations may change because of the demographic changes. Just like when you walk into Walmart and you notice the items on the shelf change from Walmart to Walmart to Walmart, the reason is because the demographics change from Walmart to Walmart to Walmart. You go into a Walmart in a low-income neighborhood, you don't see items on the shelf during the summertime for in-ground pools. You see items on the shelf for above-ground pools or something like that, but you don't see stuff for in-ground pools. But if you go into a middle-income or moderate-income demographic neighborhood, you'll see the in-ground pool items that you can purchase to take care of a pool. And these are just small things that you see. Items as far as, ethnicities are concerned, changing on the shelves. These are small little things that you see, being able to understand who the demographics and psychographics are, to understand why Walmart changes, their items. This is the same reason why you should change your items, or you should change your outlook on how you evaluate, picking areas. You're just not randomly looking for properties or deals. And I hear that all the time throughout social media. We're looking for deals. No, what you really need to be doing is being a student of the demographics and psychographics of your targeted area. Then you try to hope and pray that you find a good deal, that's in alignment with that particular demographic and psychographic, if that makes any sense.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes complete sense, man. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right, we got Winston asking a question as well. Hey, Winston, would you like to chime in and ask your question, man?
Sure. Good evening.
Good evening.
What's your recommendation on how to handle second chance leasing status.
Second chance. Say that again, Winston. Second chance. Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Yes, tenants that have, I guess, a bad rental history and moving forward when they're applying for an application on your properties. How do you, I guess, how do you vet them? Or do you even give them an opportunity if they've been evicted in the past?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, the qualifying criteria is the qualifying criteria, and I do not change it. When you're talking about a second chance, I would love to give folks second chances, but I'm running a business. My first priority is always to my family, and my kids can't stay in private school if daddy's out here, running. If I want to be charitable, then I'll run a 501c3, which is a charity foundation. When I'm buying real estate and I'm running a property, I'm not running a charity. So if an individual cannot qualify based upon their merit, then unfortunately, I cannot qualify them. I cannot, I will not lower our standards to allow that individual in. Unfortunately, I have to stick to the qualifying criteria. Have I ever done it in my past? Absolutely. Has it come back to bite me in my behind? Absolutely. So, that it's a decision that, that you're going to have to make as an operator. I will tell you this, the smaller, if you're like Rick Stott, who just said, I got a duplex, I would tell him absolutely not. Don't ever take a chance, because you don't benefit from enough critical mass, economies of scale, to make mistakes to where you can hide certain mistakes by giving folks chances. He can't hide a lot of mistakes in a single family home or a duplex or an 8 unit or a 10 unit or even a 22 unit. You got to be really careful. So, a lot of it depends upon your economies of scale. But ultimately, I would say, it's never really worked in my favor to lower my qualifying criteria to let a tenant in. Be cautious.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Andrew chimed in with a question as well. Andrew, would you like to chime in?
Looks like you guys hear me?
Yep.
Gotcha.
Okay. Yeah, I think part of my question was answered. Did he answer for Willie Smith as far as I was asking about, finding good deals. So I'm pretty much I'm debt free. I do have a rental property out in Washington State. The house paid for and is rented out, so bringing the income off of that. So I'm thankful for that. I was looking to actually get into purchasing another property, but I was kind of leaning away from the single family and was looking towards getting into maybe a duplex or some type of multifamily homes, but looking to find out, like I said, how to get started in moving forward, that making that happen, and also when it comes down to finding good deals. And you're the first person I actually heard speak on, instead of looking at the housing, the house itself, actually look at the personnel that can potentially rent that house out, to make sure that, I guess, looking for quality prospects, so to speak,
Correct.
they can rent out that house. So it's a good, that's a good TCP, I guess. But my goal is, I wanted to look into getting, like I said, some rental property, but it's going back into debt. And I think it's just a mind thing. But I know that, leveraging other people's money can be helpful, of course, to building wealth, because is a lot of people, of course, like yourself or other people on this call, who've done it before. And so it's just really getting out of that mindset, but really getting started into whether it's multifamily or duplex. What would be your advice for myself just getting started into the rental property side of the house?
Yeah, and well, thank you first of all for the question. Second of all, be careful measuring yourself to myself or anybody else on these calls. Andrew, what Andrew needs to do for Andrew and his family is what Andrew needs to do for him and his family. And you shouldn't measure yourself. Your calling, your path is your path. You know what I mean? So first and foremost, just, don't ever try to look at who's doing what or who's got what. Because there's a lot of folks right now that look like they got a whole hell of a lot. And, they're going to be giving that whole hell of a lot right back to the bank because they've been doing a lot of, I've been seeing how a lot of folks have been underwriting deals. So just because you think somebody is riding high today, something like COVID-19 comes along, changes the market, and they won't be riding so high. So at the end of the day, man, don't ever worry about measuring yourself up to what you see people doing in social media and how people look in social media are, I got 5,000 units or 10. Don't get involved. You run your race. Your race is your race and is unique. As long as the end result is getting you to where you need to be, financially free and taking care of your family, your race is your race alone, first and foremost. Second is just understanding that what do you want to do? I like what Rick said. Rick's got a duplex. A lot of my students have duplexes and quads. They rather do a duplex than they put their money in Wall Street or put their money in the bank or, so right now there's nothing wrong with getting a duplex and cutting your teeth because it's building credibility for yourself. Because did you hear I know I heard it. Rick was like, my properties are running. They're totally systemized. What Rick is really doing, and he probably doesn't even realize it. What Rick is doing is he's building a platform for himself, a brand for himself. These properties now become an extension of who he is, his resume. And so if I can then look at his properties and see how well maintained they are, if I know he's cutting and pasting out of my book and using it in his there, I know he's running a fine-tuned machine. So I might call him up from duplexes into the major leagues to help me with the project because I know that he understands my systems. That's exactly what I'm looking for. So at the end of the day, he doesn't know that he's actually building a resume for himself. So when he's able to do a much larger deal and utilize other people's money, then he's ready and he's prepared for it because he's used his own money to send himself to school and to hone his skills. I'd rather much mess with a Rick than I would a Harvard or a Stanford real estate grad. Any day, give me a Rick on my team. Any day that's cut himself on his duplexes and quads. If you can do single family units, you can do 100 units. If you can do 100, you can do 1,000. Single family is a far more difficult game. Duplex is a far more difficult game than it is to manage apartment buildings. I can manage a ton of mistakes in an apartment building and still stay afloat. So at the end of the day, if you can get involved with the duplex and, not all debt is bad debt. So if you can get involved with a duplex and you can use leverage responsibly, then, and we look at the deal and we feel confident that you should pull the trigger, then you pull the trigger on that project. Because again, not all bad debt is not all debt is bad debt is what I'm saying. So, that's something that I would definitely look at you doing.
Yes, sir. Hey, I appreciate the feedback, Bryan.
Absolutely. And that's what this is here for. I encourage everyone not to sit. I wish I had this opportunity, Nathan, to talk to somebody like myself when I started out. I didn't. I had to watch the multifamily industry and I had to guess a lot and just go out on faith because I did it for so long, managing thousands of rental units, but at the end of the day, I never had anybody to talk to like this, that I knew that was an operator. And you guys are in a unique position. You're blessed to be in a position. So, don't hold back your questions, ask your questions, because that's why we do this. You know what I mean? Talk about what it is you're facing and some of your fears and concerns. Because I promise you, and most of you don't know my entire story, but I promise you, I've had it all and I've lost it all. When I got sick in 2012, there's not much coronavirus and the change in the market. Ain't nothing compared to dealing with a brain tumor and having to learn how to walk and talk and dealing with seizures on a weekly basis that are debilitating and still having to get up and give an 8-hour lecture on my feet after having a seizure in a hotel. I've seen, taking chemo for over a year or, 6 to 9 months. I've seen the worst. And I understand what it's like to lose everything mentally, physically, financially, and come back. And so, at the end of the day, man, you guys are in a unique position to speak to somebody, and where iron will sharpen iron. Take full advantage of it. Take full advantage of the opportunities that we're giving you guys every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. and ask your questions, because it's going to advance you. It's going to make you that much better. It's going to make you that much sharper. So I tip my hat to any individual who's stepped up and asked a question tonight, because there's no stupid question. It's only stupid when you don't answer it or ask when you have somebody in front of you that can give you an answer, and an honest answer at that.
Exactly. We got another question. Is it Dieter? Feel free to chime in. Love for you to chime in and ask this question.
Yeah, you guys can. It'll just be DJ for short. How you doing, man?
Hey, DJ.
How you guys doing?
Yeah, bless.
I wanted to ask a question. So I haven't even bought a property yet. I didn't want to buy a single family home. What I wanted to do was either get a duplex or a quadplex to start my track on the multifamily. But when I started thinking about, creating LLCs, I was thinking to myself, if I'm trying to tap into the first-time home buyer loans, they're probably, and this is just me assuming, they probably want me to use my name as opposed to an LLC, because that's my primary residence. Correct? So the core of my question is, once I get the property under my name, can I still create the LLC in order to handle the other units?
Yes. So the answer is yes.
Okay.
And I have hopefully Paul and Adam are still here, because Paul and Adam can chime in. They're my attorneys.
Okay.
And they'll be able to give you some legal advice, and I definitely recommend that. But let me give you some experience. Okay. So the answer is yes. Typically what happens is you got to look at those bank docs, and you do need to have someone scrutinize those. I've always had my attorney scrutinize it, because when you move something in an LLC, it can trigger a default in the loan or trigger the balance coming due all at once.
Okay.
So you want to make sure that you're making it, if you're using financing like that, that you're letting all parties know that you plan on moving that into some sort of LLC up front. Because typically it's just, it's really them just a drop down menu and putting it in an LLC. A lot of people won't want to do that. But at the end of the day, you're still going to be held personally liable. So you want to push to have it in that LLC. Right. And you want to prove to have that LLC and have it insured under that LLC. And typically, depending on how many units you get, you want to have an LLC, 2 of them, one to own the property, and then I would create another LLC to manage the asset. Okay. That puts 2 different levels of protection. Some people may argue, oh, that's too much accounting, too much. It just helps me sleep better at night, because if I get sued by a tenant, they sue the LLC of the property management company. I don't have anything to lose in the property management company, maybe a few laptops and a couple of desks and an policy, an insurance policy, and that's it. But I'm not putting my chips at risk. Meaning,
right.
If that makes sense.
I appreciate it. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I'll definitely get a lawyer for that stuff. Thank you.
Well, they're right here. Is Adam and Paul still here? Are they
hey,
still,
what's up?
Thank you, Adam. Paul, that sounds like Paul. That definitely doesn't sound like the ugly.
That is the ugly one. That's right. It's absolutely true. Uglier and ugly. You're stuck with the uglier and dumber one. So no problem.
So, but I think even the uglier and dumber one can answer this question to help DJ out. So go ahead. Go ahead.
That's it. No, you did. No, that was a good answer. I mean, so he's talking about the default. It's a due on sale clause. It's essentially if any interest transfers, a bank always has a provision in the mortgage saying, hey, if you transfer any interest in this asset outside of whoever's named on the note and mortgage, then we have the legal ability to just ask for everything at once. So not to say that risk isn't there, but I've never had a bank actually go with that as long as you're paying on time. So it's just part of it's essentially part of.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you, sir. Thanks for
Thank you.
chiming
Thank you.
in.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Hey, that
DJ.
just cut out. Not cool.
Yeah, but you, no, you answered it.
Oh, you
did.
answered it. Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
always
good.
good.
Yeah,
to
you
have
get the
that.
idea. It's not rocket science. You got it. Yeah, it's a little risk, so it's part of the risk in wanting to do that and run it like a business. So, but
Okay.
always talk to a lawyer.
Will do. Well, thanks a lot, guys.
Absolutely. And
Hey, Brian, if you don't mind, I'll,
that too. So for DJ, I mean, that's why we have the matrix, because you're able to ask those questions and have access to to everybody that I have on my team. So yeah, don't feel like you're alone. We're here for you in this process as well.
Appreciate it, man. Appreciate it.
hey, Brian, I'll just chime in real quick because I'm actually going through that on one of my my
Yo,
What's up, buddy?
hey, announce yourself, man. Let everybody know who you are, bro.
Joe E. Banks, aka the Cash Man, aka Mr. Make It Happen. No, but I'm the director of acquisitions here at Chavis Capital. And actually, since I've been with Brian, I actually own 2 multifamily properties now, a duplex and a triplex. And I'm actually in the process of converting one of my triplex into regular financing. And so I actually have 2 companies, one that manages it and one that owns it. But I actually had to take it out because I put it in a land trust. I actually had to take it out of the trust to do the refinance, to put it in regular conventional financing, because obviously the rates are really good right now. So we want to be able to take advantage of that. Mm-hmm. And I let the broker know going through the process that, hey, look, I'm going to refinance it and put it right back in the trust. And his response to me, and I checked with our real estate attorney here in Florida, it says, as long as you're protecting your asset, that's fine. But they just wanted me to disclose to them that I actually owned the trust and I wasn't handing it off to someone else. And they were cool with me protecting my asset.
Good deal. Good deal. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't even know he was on the call. Thanks, Joey.
Hey, Will had another question. Will, you want to chime in again, man?
Yeah. My question's around. I know, using the COTA process, we're not really buying buildings. We're buying the tenants that's going to occupy those buildings. But once we identify that market that we want to be in, and we know the tenants, is going to be there for that building. When you start doing your underwriting process, man, kind of what are you looking at as far as red flags when you're doing your underwriting?
Red flags. I'm not, if I'm in an area and you actually see me begin to underwrite, there's probably not really too many red flags that I would, because I'm in that area. So I feel confident because I've done my COTA process. So I don't really see red flags that are going to be self-inflicted. If there's red flags, it's currently in the operations of the asset, meaning the current management. The value add is really in them not knowing what they're doing and me taking over the property, like what I did in downtown St. Pete, and moving the rents from $800 to $1,000, within a year and a half, and then just shoring up the operations. Right. So there's not a ton of red flags. Now, what I would say is, concerns is I'm planning for headwinds. So I'm looking at upticks in vacancy, and I'm also looking at if the rental market softens, what happens. That's why, again, I'm in a core market, because I anticipated that we would have some sort of recession. Did not anticipate COVID-19, of course, but I did anticipate that we'd be in some sort of recession. And then what I did was I ran some models based upon how long that recession would last, 3 months, 9 months, and a year. And then I stress test, against those findings. And then I come up with with an offer based on that. And a lot of my offers were thrown out. I deal directly with companies like CBRE, and they're like, oh, you need to come up, right. And here's the thing, and I don't mean to throw them under the bus either, but I mean, we're here to talk spade, a spade is a spade, and I'm just here to talk facts. Right. So if anybody takes offense to this, then then they can, I'm sure they can email me or see me, however, whatever way, shape, or form they want to talk about it. But the fact of the matter is, when you tell me I need to come up in my offer, and I say no, my offer is solid based upon the music can't continue to go like this. You guys are basing this acquisition on a cap rate that is where the pro forma is like, we're just assuming I'm going to get this pro forma. So you're asking me to buy this property really based on pro forma, not at its current operating rent schedules. And then you want me to come up even further based on, more pro forma, as if, hey, when you buy it, you can actually raise the rent another 5 to 15% within year one of operations. That's a hell of a lot of assumptions. And so, I never did. And subsequently, there's been people that bought property where I was told to come up, and Joe is on the call. He knows this. Joe, have you ever really thought, Joe, as director of acquisitions at Chavis Capital, how many times I've just saved us from getting into trouble? What if
I was just thinking about that deal on Bay Vista that we stopped because it got bid up over 4 or 5 million over what the asking price was. So, and we stopped, I think, at 30 or 31 million, and they sold it at 36.
Right. Based on, so stop for a moment. Somebody just spent $36 million for this property. So just think about this in a moment. And there was no COVID-19. Okay. So they probably did their pro forma at best, 5 to 7% vacancy. Never thinking that it would go anywhere. Vacancy would tick up anywhere in the double digits. That's number one. Number two, they underwrote this property as if the collections were coming in on a timely manner. Do you imagine how those people are feeling right now, tonight, that they just overpaid for this damn property like they did? Oh, yeah. And now we're in the midst, right in the midst of COVID-19, where people are not paying rent, people are not getting evicted. Can you imagine if you just bought a property at a cap rate like a 2 or 3%, 4% cap? Right. You're sweating bullets right now. So at the some crazy thoughts going through your head right now. So this is the point that I'm trying to make. And tons of people over the last 3 to 5 years have bought assets and didn't stress test, do their underwriting properly. And now you're going to see who's swimming naked. And so when a deal came and it finally came to me when Joe came, because Joe would wonder often in the beginning why I would always say no. But Bryan, this looks sweet. No, it's not the right demographic. It looks good. Building's good. If I can pick that whole entire building up and put it somewhere else, I would get it. But why I said no so many times, because I've been through this. I was there in 2008. And I know and I understand this what happens when the market comes back. And so, that's where, when you say red flags, for me, it's just understanding what the headwinds could possibly be and then how they would affect that particular demographic. And then understanding how that would change the underwriting and then underwriting accordingly, worst case scenario on my model, and then coming somewhere in the middle, a hybrid form of worst case and a hybrid form of the best case that everybody wants you to evaluate under, and figuring out what that is, that sweet spot and your threshold is, and then never going above that. Trust me, I wanted Bay Vista worse than, I could taste Bay Vista in my mouth right now. I had my mouth fixed up for it, almost like how you have your mouth fixed up for ribs on the 4th of July. I had my mouth fixed up for this property, man. I was like ready. But when they went over that threshold and they tried to talk me in, right, Joe? They were like, oh, no, you'll be fine. They tried
to talk us into it. And our original bid on that was 28.5. We actually went up 1.5 and we just cut them off and said, no, that's it.
They were, and these are the same guys that try to take me out.
Apartment stay, bypassed, upstairs, left.
Who the heck? For dinner. I'm not sure, somebody must be driving, but these guys try to take you out to dinner. They wine and dine you. These guys love
some cigars.
Fancy cigars. But these guys, trust me, if I had bought Bay Vista and I had been losing my shirt right now and I had been calling them, trying to get them on the phone, I promise you they'd be like, hey, Bryan, man, that it sucks. I'm sorry. But I promise you that's about all I'd get out of them. So at the end of the day, man, you got to remember these people are salespeople. Number one, above and beyond, they're salespeople. No matter how fancy the brochures look and how fancy the pro forma and the offering memorandums, if you really don't know how that property is going to be, how it's going to react in certain conditions, then you shouldn't buy it. And the only way you're going to know is if you do your CO and understand that you're not buying the building, you're buying the demographic and the psychographic And that's how you know never to go past that threshold, because those tenants in those buildings cannot go past that, no matter what they tell you. And so I backed out far more than, than I said, yeah, we could have had probably close to 1,000 units by now if I had just been going blindly on and taking other people's money and putting it into these assets. But a fool and their money are often quickly departed. And so I'd rather, I've been cautious. And I think people, on my team respect me now. And they kind of really understand what it is I've been saying. Because it's hard to understand when the music is playing and everybody's doing so well. It's really, it's really hard to truly understand, what I'm going through, or why I'm so the way I am, and making sure that I stick to my guns, because again, at the end of the day, man, Coach Wooden used to always say, "Be quick, but don't hurry." And, I'm not in a hurry to do a deal or prove to anybody how many units we have, because again, I'm, as I just told my man, Andrew, I'm not about competing with anybody else. I'm about staying in my lane. I'm about protecting my investors' money, getting them the return. They trust me. They do business because they do business with the individual, not necessarily, it's not necessarily about the deal. And so, when they can see that I'm not, in any hurry to do a deal, I think you gain more respect. So.
Hey, Bryan, this is Rick again. You just popped some questions into my head. To keep it short and simple, as far as your team, I've heard a lot of folks that are, syndicating deals. There's basically the Bryan Chavis that's out raising the money, and he's the outgoing guy. Do you have a guy, is your team just you and one other guy on the back end that's running the numbers and doing all that, or are you running the numbers for yourself? A lot of these guys seem like they're 2-person teams, and then they have the auxiliary players on the team. So there might be 5 or 10 people on the team, but it's 2 main guys. Is your team similar to that?
Yeah. So there's a junior underwriter and a senior underwriter. And then there's Joe, who's director of acquisition. So Joe is the quarterback. Joe, it all funnels into Joe. I don't have to worry about anything, deals and people, because everyone pitches about 200 to 300 deals to me every day. It gets overwhelming. Joe is in charge of bringing in all the deals. He stress tests, brings them through, the ones that make it through our criteria, kind of our proprietary criteria on how we evaluate markets and projects. Then it goes to junior underwriting, then it goes to senior underwriting, then it comes back to Joe for review with me, and then we make decisions on what we want to do and how we want to move and proceed and move forward.
Okay, and then a follow-up to that is when you're stress testing, what's the number one call out for you when you're stress testing? Because I'm hoping and assuming nobody's buying off of pro forma, but especially with everything going on now, some folks are saying that they're buying, with anticipation that the deal they can still pay their bills with upwards of 30% occupancy, or 30% vacancy, on these bigger deals, and then having an additional
well, let me stop you right there. That's horse shit.
Yeah.
First of all, you can't. So if I were to pull up my formula, and I'm actually running, my battery's actually dying here. I might, this whole thing might end any time if my battery goes, but because I think we far allotted our time. But here's the thing. If I went to someone and they were selling me a property for $5 million and I stress test or I underwrote a 30% vacancy, do you understand? I'm basically making an offer on that property, a $5 million property. I'm making an offer probably at 1.2 million. So there's no way in the world people have been closing deals and saying they've stress tested the deal at 30%, because that means they've discounted the asset. Anytime you change the vacancy in your underwriting in any kind of basic software or spreadsheet, look what happens to the number that you're going to offer for that property. It drastically drops. So that means that they're basically saying if the property is worth $5 million, they're going to offer 1.6 if they can really get by with the stress test of 30% vacancy. So that's a lie. And I've heard some of these gurus say that, and they're lying. I hate to say it, that's just
It seemed like a high vacancy. That's why I wanted to get your take, because I didn't find any deals that were even like remotely close, even at like a 15 or 20% vacancy built in.
Brother, I stress test and went, with deals, and I'm doing 10 to 15%. And, and that discounts these properties. Like Joe said, almost a million or so in some of these assets that I'm dealing with. And you're saying that people are closing deals and they're stress testing it at 30%, and the buyer and the seller and in the previous COVID-19 market, and the seller was like, I'm happy.
He said
I'm happy to discount my $5 million property to $2.5 million just because you're this guru or expert. There's just no way in the world that they bought properties after they've stress tested at a 30% or 20% vacancy. There's just no way. You can't. Look at the numbers. That means they would have had to pick it up at a huge discount. So you just know people. That's why I'm trying to tell you guys, Be careful where you guys are getting your information and who you're getting it from. Because a lot of these folks are not really gurus. They've just been benefiting from a really good market, real estate market, and they've been carried by the market when they buy these assets. They never had to go through a situation like we're all going through right now. So be very careful of who you're getting your information. And the books are all about syndicating and raising money. That shit is the easy part of this business, bro. Somebody's got to show up on Monday and actually manage it. And be very careful of the person that says all you got to do is give it to a third-party manager and you'll be all right. You need to go the opposite direction when that person talks. That's just not the way to do it, man. It's not that easy. It's not cookie cutter.
Appreciate it. That was the only person that I've heard say those numbers, and I just want to see if you saw anything crazy with this COVID, like those numbers, because I haven't. But appreciate that.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, it doesn't. And that has nothing to do with COVID either. I've heard people say that about deals that they were looking at underwriting, and even prior to COVID. There's just no way in the world you could have taken down a deal unless the person might as just hand you the deed and hand the property over to you, because they're basically getting it for free from them at that kind of discount. So, all right. Well, Nate, I'm down to about 5%. Nate, I see we got some more questions, but we'll be back Tuesday. I'm going to have to cut it off because I'm literally at 5%. So
yeah, not a problem. So yeah, please join us every Tuesday here for Rental Rescue. Also on Thursdays, we have our group coaching and training platform, Multifamily Matrix. You can go to bryanchavis.com/matrix. Over 130 pre-recorded training videos. In addition to, we also do our own group sessions live. It's a great resource, and all of your legal forms, leases, everything you need to manage your rental properties and to become a certified rental investment specialist. So please join us in the Matrix on Thursdays, bryanchavis.com/matrix. DJ asked, how long is the program for $100? We don't know. It is introductory pricing. So right now, go ahead and jump on it. While it is $100. So it's growing and growing each week. What time on Thursdays? 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Thursdays as well. But once again, the videos are available 24/7 in the Matrix. It's a 24/7 platform. There's an app you can use to watch all your videos and, chime in with other investors as well. Some of the Matrix members are on this call also. But yeah, please join us on Thursdays. $100 a month, get your certification, learn multifamily along with Bryan, and let's grow our portfolios in 2020. So Bryan, thank you so much for being here, man. And thank you guys all for joining us, and look forward to speaking with you next week.
Be blessed, everybody. See you next week.
Take care.
See you in the Matrix.